like before the break, I was saying like people can be nasty, and even I can be nasty. As I had a different thing in the email where I talked about a shared experience. I didn't know if you remembered it. Did you remember the thing I emailed about the
I,
guy we
I,
work with?
I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome! Like, and I basically like tried to give the guy a piece of advice, saying that like if you just keep your mouth shut, you can at least operate the idea that a fool opens his mouth and removes all doubt. And I was playing the game where you're like, I'm just saying, I'm just talking about Shaft, but I was also like, sweet, I get to call you a fool, with like
Right.
a pretty good like bulletproof vest on.
And you're saying though, so this is something I didn't catch in your email. You're saying you sort of did it on purpose.
I didn't even put that in the email. This is like an evolution of the thoughts I have. Like in the email,
Yeah.
I'm like, people can play this game, but I don't. I say it instead of like, I throw the like straight laced version where like they can feel insulted. It's valuable either way. Of like the point that I still haven't even driven to or whatever. But like people can say something and you can take it nastily, and they didn't mean it, or they did, and they're hiding behind a certain construction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's like therein is like the right gets me to the reason why I went off on my tangent about Eastern and Western stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have in a backdrop of one person basically talking and making like myopic kind of like setting false parameters for his world unintentionally from coming in with a particular agenda that like shades the way that he's looking at the particular situation,
Mm-hmm.
then focusing and then making sure that within his own like system checks that he's only saying true things within that system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that's what Joe Rogan's doing. And then in doing that, using like projection to like notice certain elements of that what that guy is saying, like use projection to point out things like you only want to be wrong and da da da, because that's what Joe Rogan's do. Like it's like a manifestation of Joe Rogan's intent when he comes into the conversation, then
Mm-hmm.
causes that guy to like pivot his perspective, and rather than try to eradicate the misunderstanding, he wants to like overprove, either defend what's been said, right, to the direct thing. Like now I'm defending the personal attack that's happening and it's changing me, causing me to change, or I'm gonna like attack Joe back. And you're to your point, you're like he doesn't really attack Joe back, but he does
Yeah.
kind of set off on this course where he's going now back to the parameters of the world that he set up and going back and attacking his original intent, because there's a Venn diagram where like Joe Rogan's slightly misaligned words still have impact in the world in the other construct,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that he goes about doing these things, and they just kind of keep talking past each other. And then at that point, it's just like force of will and
Yeah.
personality. And like Joe Rogan at the end of the day says intelligent things that demonstrates a deeper level of thought, but he's lazy on the communication side because, oh yeah, his fallacy is that he thinks that like being honest or being and essentially being transparent
Mm-hmm.
about
Direct.
his particular perspective is the same as it being true. Like him being honest is the same as the things he's saying being true. That's his fallacy, right?
Right.
So
They are honest.
and
They don't have to be true.
right, they are just they're an accurate expression of how of the mindset that he currently possesses, but not proof that mindset, or not like an evidence that mindset is in fact true in and of itself. And so he can't see the parameters that he set up for the discussion. He narrows that down, and then he doesn't see the parameters or the limitations within it. And then when you have the other guy doing the same thing, then they essentially are talking past each other. And each of them think that only their interpretation of the other things are correct. And in actuality, like
Yeah.
every possible version of an interpretation of every word is going in every direction, and they're doing things to make it more likely that the person will misinterpret the words that they're saying, and it's this kind of like mishmash of things. So they're both correct in the sense that they are maintaining logical consistency within their current settings. They've now been attacked and are in fact defending their perception of the attack. However, they're just saying different true things, and none of them are necessarily being bad people in a moral sense of what the word right and wrong means, which I'm like with a wink and a nod using the other version of that definition on purpose, because I helped you get to that like what Eastern part of like what can I suss out, what can't I suss out. But in the end,
grind up
those things,
grind things up and find a molecule of truth. Yeah, right.
Right. But in the end, like those things, so how do you avoid those things and how do you cope with it? I think you avoid it by recognizing that those things are just, when you can start to say those things at that high of a level. I gave way too much information, and some of it, again, to my point about like I started 10 million flame wars before we even got to the point, is like in a backdrop where there's like competing versions of philosophy and competing versions of psychology and a limited impact about how people can go about things. That with some experience on very specifically thinking about, well, how can I talk to someone in a way that's likely to overcome a lot of these biases that are built into the like not only the language itself, and then the human behavior when they're in conflict and when they're presented with these things, and the actual ambiguities of language all at the same time. You realize that almost every conflict can be described in its genesis unraveling from some point where one or more of these things have come to conspire at the same time. Right. So if you take the time to step back from it, and in fact to do some, I don't know, reconnaissance, what's the word, some forensics on the discussion, you can find out that that's the case, and that's how
post-mortem.
Yeah, and so, but you have to be willing to do that in the moment. And generally speaking, you observe also that people can't. It's asymptotic anyway. This idea of like not all this stuff is asymptotic. This idea of bias or objectivity. Like you can't ever be perfectly objective because you're forced into your perspective, and you can't be, you're always gonna have like a little bit of bias because you have preconceived notions, but you can be more objective and you can be less biased if you're like an outsider. And so generally speaking, like a mediator person will come in and like just by nature of having thought about these kinds of problems, seen them in action, having training about how to talk to people in a particular way, and just by virtue of being separate, you have like all the information that you need. But I find that like for me and my personality, if I have like a talent in that field, it's my ability to do it on things where I shouldn't. Like I'm less susceptible to getting sucked into emotional things than the average person, maybe because I'm on the spectrum in some way. I throw that out there all the time. I don't know if that it's true. My friend Billy always like gets on me about that because he's like, no, it's the opposite. And maybe, I don't know. But I can just tell you that like I'm the kind of person who could I'm the kind of person who could be like someone could murder my brother and I might still be like against the death penalty or whatever, even if I want to kill them. I might even like kill them, like if I saw them do it and then think that they don't deserve to die, or you know what I mean, something like that. So like I find that I can be more detached than what I observe average people to be, but there are limitations for me by definition, and you're always in a little bit better place. So the way to deconstruct it is set up for yourself some ability to do that, and then just be mindful in a world where that's going on all the time in the background.
Yeah.
That there are words and things there are ways you can construct sentences. And there's ways that you can look at particular situations and that that's always going on, and that it's almost always programmed in, that you can walk between those cracks by just paying attention to them. So
by being cognizant, deleting and rewriting entire paragraphs. so that they don't
And
like
how
prod those cracks and shit.
right. And then and so like that's where I can get to a place where like when we're out to lunch like the other day, where I can see like at the end of the day that lady doesn't know that she's doing the things that she's doing.
Right.
And that's more likely to be true than her knowing and doing it on purpose.
Yes.
And that there's some element of you that's like a worry
Assumes
about the fact that it might happen, mixed with like you're a big tall dude, mixed with like you're not like afraid to confront people or something. You know, just like a combination of things will make it so that it can escalate
and then
more
I'll like
quickly or
confront
something.
them with the idea that I want the best and like and hope for the best. And even if I think like in the moment they're being a lesser version of themselves, I'm like, let me just call attention to that and hope that that will trigger you to be better. Like some kind of weird like fantasy Disney, like, not Disney, that's like shitty, but like fairy tale like hero or something. Like
Yeah, you put like extra expectations on them, and then also like
yeah,
and then like yeah, it's like double extra expectations. Like
Yeah.
extra expectation of a normal. Well, it's like not extra. Well, it's like extra expectation that they'll perform over their capability, and then like an extra layer of disappointment when they don't. Like on top of it, you're just kind
Right.
of like I expect more, and I expect more than an average person would from you, and then I'm more disappointed than an average person would be, even at the high level of like expectation I
Yeah.
set.
It's actually a
My
pretty fair
disappointment's
summation.
also
but-
higher, you know.
Yeah.
So this is just me trying to think about that. So what I'm saying is like I didn't even mean to talk about you, but it's more
No,
like
it's fine.
I can see that lady is like she can't control that, and then when I think about like well, how does cognition work? It's like, well, okay, like my like light hits an object and that object reflects and it goes to my eyes, and my eyes like take the object in and it hits the back of my retina, which like sends these nerves to my brain and it reverses the image from being upside down to right side up and da da da. Like there's some things that I don't control in that process, but at some point in time I interpret something, right? It goes
Right.
from being like a fact that I see it to here's what I think about it that's true.
Yeah.
And if I
I start
know
focusing on things in the vision. You
Yeah,
have this huge
and-
field of vision, but you're really looking at like 2 points, you know? Like
right, and those things are true by definition, but there's an element that says at some point I am contributing to the supposed truth of this with like subjective ideas or whatever.
Right.
And as soon
And
as
then-
as soon as the
and then you
the
don't
content-
order a milkshake to punish yourself.
Yeah, but the thing I say to myself about how in theory emotions ought to work, to meaning like small o, not like moral imperative, but the way that like when functioning properly, if I can think, you know, it's just kind of like this, like the example I would give is like, let's just say like there's a cardboard box on the ground, and then there's like people moving a piano like up into a building, and like the piano falls down and like smashes the box, like they breaks from the pulley and like and it smashes the box. Like if I think that there's like a baby in that box, then like, or like a box of kittens or something, I should get sad about that. And then if I am sad from the fact that I think that there's those people in there, that makes sense. And usually your emotional action or makes sense from the thing you think. But there's like a lot of times like knowable facts about like were there or weren't there kittens. And if I like insist that there were kittens in that box and there weren't kittens in that box, then like I should think something else. And it can be manipulated in both ways. Somebody could trick me and make it look like they put kittens in the box, like Tom Green and like an asshole thing. And then like it falls on it. And then I think that the kittens were killed because I saw the fucker put it in there and he did something to trick me and it turns out that they weren't. Then it's like, yeah, that describes the entire range. I see someone put the kitten in there, so it makes sense that I'm sad. And then
or they're toy kittens. You can get fooled on both ways. You can be like fooled into thinking they were kittens, or because there's like intentional,
Right.
or there was toy kittens and you were, you know.
Right, but in any event, like in the end, when I find out that they're not kittens, then like my anger should transfer from like the person who tried to trick me, and like you know. But
Yeah.
I should no longer
It
feel
can
sad
transfer into
about
them
kittens.
or into like, well, maybe there ought to be protections for kittens, like, or
Right,
even
right,
into
right.
like I should lose some weight or whatever. That's when you really know kung fu, you know. But
Well, well, so to me on that front, then that's how I can cope. That's well, so that's one way that I can cope with when I see these things happening is understanding that at every level,
I'm
like,
sorry, I was just like fucking. There should be signs that say like warning box may not have kittens in them. Like,
yeah, it's like your responsibility. These are the questions of law that are super interesting about like where do your obligations end? Like, you know, and that's always a blurry like of all the Western shit that I talk about like you have to write stuff out. There's like a very Eastern like what would a reasonable person do?
yeah,
And then you just get to decide, and that's it. They're just kind of like, no, no, no,
you're
that's
like,
as
I'm a
close as we're
person.
getting you.
I hope I'm reasonable.
Yeah. Well, this is as close as we're getting you for guidance. Now, like, whatever societally our sort of collective consciousness thinks about what that is, that dictates, like, how we're going to punish. So, like, if
Yeah,
we were a super careful, like, thoughtful, outward-reaching society that like to control situations, like, we might, in type A, we might actually have to write the fucking sign. But if
right.
we're the society is like, shit happens, dude, you got to break some eggs to make omelets, and, like, then you don't. And, like, you know.
And we're
But so
definitely,
for
well, yeah. Let's not even get into that. I was gonna say something, but yeah,
well, I mean let's put it. I'm curious now,
yeah.
but I want to.
Uh,
I can
we're
finish the
moving
thought
from one to the
easier.
other. That's all, you know.
Yeah. I can finish the thought easier to just say that like that's one mechanism that helps me like cope with it. So we talk about how do you name it? It's like, well, do the deconstruct and recognize that it's happening, and then if you can do. And if you can accept the background that deconstruct, I can only tell you that that's my experience. That I like it's rare is the fight that exists that isn't the cause, where you're just like, no, this is truly an interesting, diverging battle of reasonable minds disagreeing, and there's pros and cons, and you truly could go one way or the other, and you got to pick one or whatever. Then like, holy
Yeah,
shit,
yeah, yeah.
you know, like
As we
that
drive
almost never
closer to me
happens.
making my point, which will actually like devalue the whole conversation in some weird way, but
No, but I mean, so like, but those things are relatively rare, and most conversations are like that. And if I know that, then that helps me in that way of like, are there kittens in the box or not? Like, feel differently about my interaction with like the stupid lady behind the counter at the place.
mm-hmm.
So then that's part A, and then part B is like getting back to like the Joe Rogan. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one way I would cope with it. And the second thing um, is that and I guess also I should say part 1B is to like contribute positively to the situation by just trying to figure out what constructive ways can you communicate, and then just doing that, which I guess leads me into part 2, which is just get for me, my coping mechanism is get myself to the high road. So if Joe Rogan's yelling at me, when Joe Rogan's like, no, he's just being like, he's being mentally this like verbal douchebag tough guy, and he thinks you know, and this is the thing that if people don't like him, why they don't like him is because he's doing the equivalent of like pushing someone around in an MMA ring.
Oh
But
my
the
god,
deal is
this
that
is like a whole nother
communication.
thing I think about a ton lately too. It's like
Well,
as
then,
we
but
move to a cerebral society, cerebral bullying, you know.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is that he's not bullying because he's smarter. He's using the same tactics that he would use, but he's just not listening. And it's like he's not living up to his like half of the social contract. So he's like a selfish fuck, like like verb fuck. He's like a selfish lay in bed of like, I'm just gonna talk at you, and that's going to suffice as like we're having a conversation and I'm winning it. And you're like, well, no, not really. So the way to win in that scenario is to take the high road by essentially saying, look, I want to make all these other points. I'm the person now, Bennett or whatever his name is.
Dunning.
Dunning, dude. I will just. It
He's
just
not
like
Brian
doesn't matter.
Dennehy. He's Brian Dunning.
So what I do if I'm that guy is I lead that horse to water. I say, well, okay, It's actually, if I truly want to get my point across, this is in that like box of kittens kind of way now. If I truly want to get my point across, while it's tempting to want to like react emotionally and go the other way, if I'm like, well, okay, Joe Rogan's doing X and Y and Z because I've undertaken the thought process ahead of time to be like, okay, well, wait a minute. Now that I see that this disconnect's happening, I can go back and rethink the way that I'll say things so that he'll see what I'm saying. And if I do that in a cogent way, and then Joe Rogan still tells me to go fuck myself and shut the fuck up, it's fine if I've said it the right way and he won't do it. Then it just becomes on him. And it's just better. Like at that point, there was nothing, you know, him doing that would be proof that it wouldn't have mattered. You know, if I had done the average thing, I would have told him to go fuck himself. I would have argued back with him. I would have called him a fucking wanting to be right tool douchebag or whatever he's trying to do and say. And instead, I've like undertaken the pains to like explain it, and it demonstrates that it wouldn't have mattered. Like I wouldn't have gotten, you know, either way I would have proceeded. Joe Rogan had decided ahead of time that his objective was going to be to make me wrong and to never listen and da-da-da, which would be ironic in that scenario, but I think probably accurate. And then if he doesn't do it, then I can walk away knowing that I, like, you know, with basically like the internal satisfaction that I like attempted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And those are the two, but you can't, like, how can I make myself feel better about it? Well, I have to, like, that's the box of kittens thing. Like I have to be like, happiness and what I can contribute and contribute it. And this is like, Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things, right? It's just like that simple
the prayer
like, bullshit. So it's the combination of those two things, and I need to go back and fix for myself the emotional reaction that I can't be, like, it's on me to not be crushed with upsetness about the scientific fact that Joe Rogan isn't listening or whatever. And can't hear it.
And what's the on some level they're on the Joe Rogan show, so they better Joe understands, and hopefully the other guy, I don't see how he couldn't, that they're on a show with a million people watching, you know.
Yeah
And like that's where it gets super. I would wonder, or like postulate whatever, like it's got to be extra hard to just take like the internal satisfaction when he has, and he doesn't want, or like, you know, to some degree, a chunk of his audience that's like, yeah, Joe, you kicked his ass or whatever, right? Like there's some people who like it, and there's some people who, and like to some degree, he's like, yeah, thank you for agreeing with me, like, thoughtfully. But then there's people who are just like, yeah, you should have also like punched him, like you just like, they're just like nasty about it, you know. And like on any argument, the more intense and vociferous fans are gonna just be like, even if Joe Rogan lost in some kind of objective boxing points measured fashion, or like you go to shit where it's the people, you go to shit. Let's not call it shit. You do the ADR competitions where it has to be like judged, you know. If someone has to win, and there's got to be like a point system, even if it's in their heads. And these fans, even if Joe like loses on that point system, are gonna be like, Joe won, you know. Dude was a douchebag. Fuck that guy. His haircut, you know. And like, yeah, you're gonna, geez, you have to already deal with that, and then you got to do your thing. You're saying right now, of just like, I did my best, you know.
Well, and that gets me to like the crypticness of the there is no spoon thing, and it fits in with the construct of like Eastern versus Western, because it's like there is no spoon thing is like, stop bending the spoon, it's impossible, right? And why is it impossible? Because you think that you're like looking at a spoon and you're treating it like the spoon that happened in the real world, where it's this metal thing that you could bend, but it's not a metal thing you can bend. It's this like thing in your mind. And so like one person is just like, oh, I'm going to try to bend the spoon, and that's what people do. And then the other people are like, aha, there is no spoon, so I'm going to bend myself. And then really but when they approach the fight, they're kind of like so enamored with the fact that they think like there is no spoon and people just have to bend themselves, that they try to bend the other people.
Yeah.
So they're just like, I skipped the spoon. I'm smart. I'm bending you. And they're like, no, bending me is bending the
He's trying
spoon.
to
You
bend
fucking
the spoon. Right.
right. And so then the deal is that like where I was talking. So those are the two. And you're like, well, like I've like that describes like 95% of the world. That's basically a different way to get at my point of like almost in every argument there's like people talking past each other, and it's like there's either people trying to bend the spoon or people thinking that they, since they know about the concept of bending the spoon, that they're not bending the spoon, but they are. And then like a truly enlightened person can only asymptotically do this, but that is just, and it's asymptotic because of the infinity of all reality. But it's that like when you think there is no spoon, and in every circumstance you're just bending yourself. And it doesn't mean it in that, like, it doesn't have to mean it in this, like, sacrificial lamb
Right.
kind of way. Although I'd like to go back to one of our quotes in the, you had a take on this that was demonstrative of, like, a thing that I see in you is, like, a pattern that's interesting where, like, there's, like, a sacrifice element to it, right? That's Mama Jamma was, like, coming out in one of your interpretations of it. But it's, like, when you bend yourself, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to sacrifice yourself, although it can mean that.
Take love and give it back or whatever. Or...
Yeah, you had this thing. We'll have to find the exact quote because it's like super
I know the
interesting
quote because it was like inspired by watching an interview with the Dalai Lama, which was like he has to just like take all of the shit China gives him and give back only love, you know?
Oh, right. And that's like a very like Christ figure way of like looking at like you're the one who has to bend. But it's really just to say that in each instance, like you're going to be provoked with something, and like there's going to be a true answer, and that true answer is going to essentially be in your mind, right? Like like him, like, you know, like there is no spoon. It's only yourself that bends, and it's not, again, just in the way that you can't make other people bend because that's the spoon. You don't bend yourself either.
Yeah.
Because that's like trying to bend the spoon. It's more
no
like
spoon, so don't make yourself the
right.
spoon. So.
Right, but it's just that like your interpretation of like what is and isn't important, or what it is that you're in fact doing when you're doing something, is you bending, right? It's like you accepting a different level plane of parameter about what it means to get the effect of bending the spoon. And in real life, it means like bend the fucking metal thing, and here it means like reprogram shit on the fly, and like, you know, in the Matrix or whatever. But like metaphorically, it's just that like figure out like what's the disconnect between you and the other thing, and try to name it, and that it's not just spoons, it's like the whole fucking universe in every direction all the time. And that like that's what the enlightened people do, is they recognize in that sense. And I would argue that within that you have to also be tempted not to say, but there's no such thing as reality because there's like 10 million infinite possibilities.
Sure.
And philosophers do that incorrectly, in my opinion. That's where I'm kind of like brushing off like a million years of philosophy that would be the flame war of my, because I'm just kind of like, well, I'm sorry that that's confusing to you. It just so happens that it doesn't have to, like, while we like to use proof often for facts to be like, see, that's true because I proved it. Proving things is still only a specific relationship between you and a fact. And it doesn't necessarily, things can be true without being able to be provable. Those things are not like, it can be, I can't prove that it's true. It's true that I can't prove that it's true, but my inability to prove it doesn't mean that it's false. Right. And that's like, as soon as you know that, you're kind of like, okay, and that doesn't speak to whether there is or is not ultimately sort of like a finite idea of like all things which are.
Right.
Or whatever. Not finite, but like at least asymptotic. Anyway, mind bendy, but there is no, that's why the Matrix is so fucking good and everybody can fuck themselves. I know that it's like funny in some people's ways, but
I mean, people
like, no.
Pick out interesting art, you know, we love Adam Reed and all that, but he has like a huge thing where he just is like, the dialogue sucks. Like, and that's like word for word, you know. Dialogue from the Matrix sucks or whatever. And you're like, oh man, but
what is that? You know, when does he say that?
He says it in C-Lab via the doctor, the black guy that's always like, the more like reasonable, like the character that like speaks more like reasonably throughout the show. That's the like other characters have all these flights of fancies, and he does too. But can't remember the character name. But the Black Doctor will just, like he walks in on everybody like arguing about turning into a robot and literally becoming robots through the argument, like ripping their faces off and shit. And then he like walks in, and he's like, but the dialogue for the Matrix sucks, and gives like some, like it's like a little bit longer than that. He like backs it up with like some additional sentence, but basically, yeah, and you're just like, wait, this is them taking a chance to just say that, like their like little opportunity, to speak through their characters.
So, I mean, I would say, like, examples of the Matrix dialogue sucking. Don't get me in any of this jurist my diction shit, or you can cram it up your ass.
People say that in real life.
It's I mean, it's that's god awful.
Yeah.
And it's also bad in a way of it represents, maybe negatively too, like ways that people would never talk. And when I say negatively, it's like for the reason that like it isn't like useful to talk that way, or it's like it doesn't represent like conversations happening between people. I would say like Ayn Rand books like suffer from the same things. They have like super fun, satisfying conversations sometimes to read, where they're just like, but I didn't say the thing forthwith which you thought that I didn't, for you knew I would say it, and only then would you have said, you're just like, okay, like that was like great to use like 10 million like vague words, but it's just like, but I had anticipated, of course, that you would know that I would say that you, and you're just like, okay, like like okay.
You're talking like a Bond villain.
Yeah, or like a little bit like Aaron Sorkin does that too, a little bit, where they just have like these all their speeches are like perfect little like, well, speeches. They're like constructed,
They're written.
Yeah. Setting that aside, like just like an interaction, it's like stop trying to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, remember what's true. There is no spoon, and then you'll see it's not your the spoon that bends or whatever. That's just good. That's just cool. And I know it's like a little simple proposition, but it's like as a metaphor and like the tightness of that story. Like to say that it sucks is just a reaction to the fact that everyone likes it, and then there's unexamined people
we
who
were just
overly
hitting a
like
million points of like where this has gone with me since. This is good.
Yeah, so let's go back to the thing you didn't want to, or I don't know, like take it. Like, I'm sure you have. There's like a bunch of things I want to hear from you. Like you have like the thing that you've been like keeping in your pocket the whole time.
Well,
about, like where does this end up?
Where is the
And then
point?
you have this other thing that you were gonna like not bring up earlier.
Oh, the society was moving from one to another of the topic we were saying, and I can't quite remember. Oh, cerebral. We were moving from like the need of like strong men and women to go out and hunt and like do physical shit to like now we need strong of mind men and women to like defeat the problems we're approaching with like finite nanometer silicon and shit, And
that's been true for a long time too.
Yeah, I mean it's just the severity of the need is like moving up and up forever, and wish I would stop saying so to wreck the entire fun conversation, it came from enjoying a video game enough to go to the forums on Steam and start like interacting with people. And I already am fairly hermit-like in my interactions with people, so I went to that forum with some glimmer of like, this game's pretty great, but it really needs some help. And it was a kickstarted game that had very little like testing. Is my actual expert, I have worked as a tester, opinion. Maybe only for a couple years, but I feel like, you ever seen Time Bandits with all the midgets?
Yeah.
The bad guy goes like, God day one he created like light, day and night, and he's like, I would have been like supercomputers day one, bam, like
yeah. Hello.
that's no, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly.
You're
And
just
then
like,
we
wait.
we walked into like QA, and we were like, day one supercomputers, fuckers, like, you know.
Well, so a little thing to note. I do think one thing that's I'm just like going to support your point about you being an expert in like a weird roundabout way, but in law, one thing I like about courts and law, like a lot of times people really focus on like negative parts of like lawyers and what lawyers do and how society does things, and I think that's right. There's like weird technicalities and things gone amok, and then like a lot of like what gets tampered with in the law is like the process by which we create them is corrupt. And so
Sure.
it allows bad people to come in and just say this is the law, so it has the impact and effect that we should be giving, and in fact nature and society give to like only true interpretations of things that sort of name the best frameworks we can come up with for coming up with fair things, and just replaces it with like because I fucking said,
Yeah.
you know. And so there's lots of things with law and lawyers that get to that because they're like lawyers are people who like peddle in the system, but there's a flip side of this. It's like a lot of things in the law are surprisingly good at like being flexible to like get to the right result, like more than you expect when you're just like on the surface, and especially when people like to focus on the negative parts of that of law and like how it gets made, and there's no question there's some negative elements, but laws like judges will do stuff about like there'll be like a way that you can do things, and they'll see that someone's tricking the system, and then there's like methods for rooting that stuff out, and that like the test for it is like it's basically like in the Joe Rogan way, like, but what were you actually talking about? Like, fucking stop, Joe Rogan, shut the fuck up. Like, what this guy, like, he did imply that you in fact should take it. The amount that he said to take or not is irrelevant, not only to what this guy's saying, but also to what you're saying. You know, and it's like, and that's like why, like, that's like a cool part of lawyers and law. So I like to use the metaphors in things in the law sometimes, because it just has it actually in the backdrop when you're not paying attention, and when lay people are like, it's bullshit, you're like, no, it's like sort of weirdly set up to be like, if everybody plays by the rules, this is fine, and when they don't, like, there's really specific ways that you can use discretion to weed out the like, nah, that's bullshit because of this, like it doesn't meet that reasonable person standard, like, you're full of shit. And it just has like this full of shit clause that it hopefully gives to trustworthy people, and it's not perfect, can be corrupt, but it's like designed to like let someone come in and be like, fucking bullshit. Like I catch the little like sideways wink that you just did at the audience there before you like lied about this. And just like, and in that world, you can be an expert. It's like the level for being an expert witness, like the level of like is just like you have to have like an above average knowledge. It's like basically they kind of like it's kind of like my mom can't be an expert in QA, but the fact that you've done it qualifies you, and it like with the recognition that like
on
if
top
you're smart
of being
enough,
like a lead QA and shit, and like, you know, all kind of
so
above
the
and
QA
beyond your point. But I'm actually like wrecking your point. Like I'm like ignoring it when I say that. But yeah, you're right. All I have to do is have been in QA.
Well, because what they do is they're like, let the jury fucking suss out whether his title means anything, and like how much experience he has, how much they care about it. And number two, if he's well, like go back to like my cousin Vinny. My father's a mechanic. His fucking father's a mechanic. My uncle and 3 sisters are fucking mechanics. I'm a fucking mechanic. And then he's just like, oh yeah, well fucking answer this question. And she's like, yeah, I can, because like all these people were mechanics. I fucking know shit about cars. Like, and the court's just like, cool. It's just
You're
like set up for that.
Right.
Yeah. So by the way, besides all that, you're a fucking expert. So setting aside the law and stuff, like in the world where like, fuck you, you didn't do enough QA, like I will allow it. Like the judge is allowed to be like, you're an expert, and like if anybody knows you, like you're a fucking expert.
Yeah.
Like every game company should just listen to the shit that you say. Anyway.
Shit that I will say 1,000 of, you know. The 1,000 shits I will say about one fucking game and shit, you know. Yeah, I go to this forum and I And so I can start dragging it back from the minutia, making it like, dude, you went to a forum and argued with people, and that's what you should spend an hour and a half talking about. Like, well, no, I went to a forum and had like an enlightenment lightning bolt or something, and spent like hours. Well, it took like hours for the lightning bolt to strike, and then like tried to write an email to my friend who's like knows about like debate and conversation in the human condition, and couldn't even write that. Like, I was like, I'm going to fucking pass out. I cannot. It is 12 in the morning. I should have been asleep at like 4 in the morning. It's 12 in the afternoon. Sorry. Like, yeah, shit, man. I have that. You get that error wrong, and it sounds crazy or whatever. But it's 8 hours past my bedtime because this thing like bugged me, and I was like, shit. Let me talk about it. You go to the forum. Game has obviously not been QA'd to the levels of expectations that meet my expectations, and a lot of people who are coming in and complaining about things. Game is fun. It's like QA'd to a certain level. Like, it doesn't like crash when you launch it and shit. It's not an alpha. Every component has been implemented. Whether it's like a good implementation or not. Whatever, it probably had a beta at some point, and this is like
it's content complete or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That was like the thing for alphas and betas and shit when we were there.
Right.
But to start reeling it back to a better, more interesting, well, whatever, to take it to a non-minutia level, forums, you can't go onto any forum, like just about any forum on the internet, and this is true of the Steam forums, and you can't fucking fight on the forums, right? Like, you can have like intense discussions, but you can't be like, fuck you, That shit just gets pulled off the forum. It just gets deleted. You can't be like, you're an idiot. You can't. There's all kinds of shit that, and then it starts like rolling back to like, I find people who have like the opinion about this thing in video games to be idiots, and then you put it in a thread where people express that opinion. And you're like, I didn't call them, the people in this thread, idiots. I said
Right.
a global thing about people who liked certain things in games, And you rely, unfortunately, on the Steam forums, to be specific to the exact thing that like caused the like inspiration of the whole like self-reflection, was like the Steam forum asks that the developer of the game moderate the forum. They don't have any qualifications beyond they put the game out. And someone at the game company is then tasked. And even if there was someone at the company who would be good at moderating a forum, they may not get that job. Like, it's like the guy who has the time. And in this particular case, there's 4 people making this game. So just like a guy gets tasked, Yeah. And it's not like his fault, other than he made a game and put it on Steam, and they're like, part of the job is doing this, yo.
Well, but it's interesting too, because like one thing I didn't even consider, because I read part of this. I mean, I need more explanation on this part because I only read like whatever you wrote. But it's interesting about whether these guys would recognize that as an authority, meaning that they had to do it.
Yeah, you
could... in other words, they certainly agreed to it, so there's no question there, right? That there's like some element of like, well, that might be enough in a lot of people's mind to create the obligation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like whether they recognize that authority or whether they're just kind of like, meeting the spirit or the letter of it or whatever is like.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now. Is that their contract says you got to put a moderator, and so they do, and that moderator doesn't have to do anything, and they might get called out on that later because the forum becomes a cesspool.
Yeah, they might like look at their plan and just say, look, in general, we've got like a list of 75 things to do.
Yeah.
And like, here's number 75 for you, guy who's supposed to also do this, this, and this, and he puts exactly like the 75th level of priority or whatever.
Yep.
That's it.
And somewhere above 75, without a doubt, will be to go to this forum, which is, it's just tied into a bunch of, it's like the discussions page on Steam is a tab somewhere between store and like reviews. Like there's like 6 tabs. I don't have it open in front of me, and I literally don't go. It's like discussion, store, guides, reviews. Like there's a bunch of tabs, and one of them's discussions. That's the forums. And the way their system works is actually kind of like interesting. Like they put up a patch for the game that becomes like a tab that people can go to. They've chosen you can respond to the patch. Like the game gets patched on the fly because it's Steam. The place where that patch lives forever as like what did you do with like patch notes or the fact that it exists at all, because patch notes can just say like fixed bugs, but in this case they don't do that. They actually do a good job of listing what the patch does. And then because it's on Steam, it has like a ability to comment, just like it's a discussion or a forum. And
Right.
they also replicate that as a thread on the actual discussion forums. And they don't actually combine, so it makes it funny if you go looking for. I actually got up out of bed when I was like writing you. I was like, I want to make sure this quote is right, and I went to the like Steam tab and was like, wait, where's my like thing I wrote? Oh shit, they like deleted it? No, because I responded to the thread about the patch, not the patch.
Right.
So I had to like
funny.
take an extra second and find it and then go from there. These guys, so ranking of 75, moderation somewhere above 75 is like actual like weird like self-advertising, like we made a patch with exclamation points and happy faces, and like they go on the forums and do that a lot. They tend not to, especially since the second, like after about the first week of March, and this is April 5th, they don't really respond to anybody talking about anything other than like, yo, my controller's broke, like I booted the game up and it crashed. People that's a double. People are still coming in with these problems, and there's a good section of us talking about like, boy, wouldn't it be great if all of these problems, and some of them are bug ass bugs, where you're just like, I pressed up and kick and my dude didn't kick. You don't do that. Don't press up and kick, everyone, because it doesn't work. And like, because people will be like, how come sometimes my guy doesn't kick? And I sussed it out because I'm playing the game for fun, but I have like this weird like QA thing that never goes away now with me. So I have a text document open in the background where I write down my bugs, and I also write down suggestions, because that was like the way you stay sane for me in QA, was like suggestion. And sometimes my suggestions are like if I press up and throw, how about it throws with the up throw? Like, and that's like a sarcastic like version of what I'm saying is minutia. I wish I could come up with like a good example where it's like a suggestion. Your game doesn't do a thing that every other game that is like it does, and it's not because you're being a unique snowflake. It's because you're being bad, or at least. Let's like not even say bad. It's just you've chosen to ignore convention, or you were like unable to achieve like parity with like common convention. Is it possible to hit that level? Like the bugs is suggestion anyway. I write those things as suggestion, and like people will get like hot at that shit. Like what? That'll like make the game easier, and I want it harder, and I'm like, oh man, like this is like that's like a tough thing. Like where you're talking earlier about entire problems that are like actual like opposite direction, tough to resolve like problems. Game is easy, game is hard. If your game doesn't have like difficulty selection, that's going to be really hard to address, right? Like I want it easier, I want it harder. It's like opposite direction. So I go on these forums and people are being nasty, and they're saying that construction, like I said earlier, and that made me be like, holy shit, how do you deal with people who are like being nasty? Like I said in the earlier recording, where it's like they're just being nasty. They're just like, I want to hurt. I want to be like, shut up. Like they're not even like really like thinking, or they're thinking enough to circumvent forum rules about civility.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, that's a tougher one. I mean, I think if you can identify like bad faith actors,
Yes, there. That's a great word for it. Bad faith.
then like, I mean, the answer is like you don't engage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
But I see, well, but I mean that's
Well,
not
you don't
satisfying.
reciprocate. Sometimes I engage, but I don't reciprocate. You know, that's like a different tact. But sorry.
Well, I mean, I think that's where like, what do you mean by that?
I'm saying like keep going. I keep jumping in, and I actually want you to like keep going.
No, but I mean, I'm just gonna like was gonna go like ice skate around on that pond for a second. I mean, I don't have like a, well, in other words, I would say more like what do you mean by reciprocate and don't?
So the reciprocate versus engage. Like on a forum, you could respond to that person who's like, everybody who likes this is idiots, and you're like, hey, I said something to the effect of liking it earlier, and you can respond to that and be like, I don't. You can respond to it and be like, I like it. What do you mean by that? Or you can respond to it and be like, you can take like a similar approach of them where you're like, you go for like the more like soft Aikido, Judo, like I don't. You could reciprocate on their level, which is like somewhat better than just being like, fuck you for calling me stupid. You could reciprocate on the like, I wouldn't deign to describe, like I'm not the arbiter of who's stupid for liking shit, you know. Or you can just go back and be like, you can try to defend yourself, right? Which is kind of what who knows what they want. Maybe they just wanted to like hurt you for saying it, or maybe they wanted to provoke you into being like explaining yourself. I do find I basically like research everything I put on the forum and put up great, but the effect has actually been positive in the intervening time. But I think maybe it's something similar to what you're saying, where the courts have ways of like sniffing out people who are like trying to fuck the system. Mm-hmm. I hope if I use the report flag and I go like, do you see what this guy's doing here? You know, hopefully these developers who've been assigned this task of moderation will like look at that, and then like what's their call? Like send the guy like a text that's like, hey, tone it down. Do they delete the guy's post? Like what like scorched earth or like polite ding dong, you know, email, ring their doorbell and just say like, hey man, cool it. We all like River City Ransom, you know, like there was like a big patch that addressed. I think this is interesting too. They called this a bug when the game came out. You have your little save file from playing by yourself, but you can go on the internet, play with up to 4 people. You pick your guy from your save file and you jump into this online thing and you play. And when you're done, this game has like leveling and like you buy like equipment and moves and you make your guy better. When you're done playing on the internet, your guy's the same. It doesn't save. And they were like, that's our like idea. And on day 0, when the game came out, everybody went, what the fuck? Like, why do I play with anyone ever then? This game is about making my guy better. The only guy who gets better is the guy hosting. Anyone who joins him, their guy makes no progress. And they were like, yeah, you're fucking right. And they spent 2 weeks fixing that. So you go play online, your progress is saved. And they're like, it was a bug. And I'm like, wow, it was actually like a feature. You know, and that's like that's a joke, you know, all by itself. That's a trope, you know.
Right.
Bug is a feature, and they
feature.
like, yeah. In this case, feature was perceived as bug, and they actually were like, I'll allow it. It's a bug. Like people just saw it as a bug when it was like intended. And they did that.
Yeah, but that's because that's like that's like of like the crimes of the world.
Mm-hmm.
In like it's like a lesser crime to have like, oops, I did something and it didn't work right, rather than like I purposely chose shit for my shit sandwich lunch or whatever. Then it's like you're a worse person if you did that, you know.
They did
That's
that.
Funny.
They did that patch. Yay, good. I actually don't play the game multiplayer that much. I actually play it local multiplayer, which always worked fine because it writes it all to one save file. So like, when my friend sits on the couch with me and levels up Ryu and I level up Ken, they both stay leveled up because it's local. And
Mm-hmm.
they put up a big like blog post. They put up a post. It was long, 1,000 words. Long enough. It's do like whatever stand. I was like, this is a thoughtful length. I didn't think it was long, like too long. You know. I said, this is cool. Someone responded to it who had a very hard. This is not me. Someone responded to it with a very hardcore insight about like how video game development is going and how the erosion of standards, if you go back to like the earliest Macintosh, like 79 70s and 80s era, like when games were starting to be like available at home, you put the game out right the first time, and all this shit is like eroded to a certain degree due to the internet making it like you can put a game out and you can patch it. And maybe that's like not that big a deal, but there was a time when that was like bullshit. You get your game right and you put it on like a cartridge and you can't rewrite it,
Right.
Damn it. And you put it out there, and that even in those eras, there were rare like editions of carts on like Super Nintendo that had like different versions with a bug important enough that someone fixed it for whatever like crazy reason. Like, man, that's like an intense dedication back then. It's weird because now people will more take them to task for doing that. Why didn't you get it right the first time? Or in this case, a month's worth of patching times later.
Interesting.
And his post was, and I'll also get to why I know this, that his post was 1,200 words long. And dude was upset because he bought game, had bugs, and a month later it still had bugs while the patches were rolling in and not getting fixed. And the response from the original developer who wrote 1,000 words was 2 or 3 points, one of which was like, fucking 1,200 points for this, bro. Basically, like calling him out for writing a long post. And I was like, but what? Like, it immediately struck me. It's like, you're both are wordy fellows for whatever. You're both this amount of wordy. And yet,
Right.
This is like a shared, like, love, not a fucking, a hate. Like, this should be something that makes you, like, appreciate each other. You also both love the game that this is like a sequel to enough to like make the game and make a 1,200 word post. And I actually made a post about that. And also the guy was like, keep it like civil, man. This is essentially over the line for the forum guidelines. You're right on the you're not on the line, you're over it, and I'm allowing it because you're obviously passionate or something. Like he decided not to moderate that post, and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, it was emotional, but he wasn't like, you're a fucko, and he didn't violate things like that. He was just like, I'm taking you to task for not having standards that conform to these standards that are like an existing set that are maybe a bit archaic, but you could see where he was coming from.
Mm-hmm. But so, what's this is like, I'm interested now because I go back to my thing about like people are talking past each other.
Yeah.
They're using words that like can be interpreted in multiple ways. There's like a personal element, like in the, like not in the Joe Rogan, like fuck you, pushing you around with my perception, but in the like, I've managed to slip an insult in when I didn't mean to. And then there's like expectations too, right?
Yeah.
Or like, so people have an expectation that's like, I'm gathering from context what this is like, River City Ransom 2? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, just without a 2, colon,
Yeah.
River City Ransom, colon 2, but 2 is underground,
Yeah.
Licensed game, kickstarted. Actually, let's get into some of that after the archive.